Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're looking at how America's rise to become the richest and most powerful country in history was, well, actually pretty unexpected. When you look at the grand scope of history, it's really easy to just assume the US was always destined for greatness, right? But the historical record tells a totally different story. Most of North America was literally ignored for over 100 years after Europeans first spotted it. So we're going to explore how this totally overlooked landmass completely transformed the globe. What we're really looking at here is a tale of two absolute extremes. You've got this very slow, almost stumbling colonial start, where superpowers like Spain and Portugal practically paid zero attention to North America. But then, suddenly, that slow crawl shifts into gear. It turns into this breakneck, unstoppable expansion. We're going to be focusing heavily on that specific explosion of growth today, a period we call the fast phase. Here is our roadmap for the explainer. 1. Unexpected beginning. 2. Forging a new nation. 3. The fast phase. 4. War, peace, and purchases. And 5. A new world power. Section 1. An unexpected beginning. So think back to Columbus. When he sailed west looking for Asian spices, he obviously thought he'd hit India. Instead, he finds the Caribbean islands, and crucially, indigenous gold. This massive find prompted Spain and Portugal to literally just draw a line down the middle of the map, splitting the non-Christian world right between them. Portugal heads east for an Asian trading empire, and Spain gets busy conquering their half in the Americas, mainly down south where all that gold and silver was. Because of this, North America's initial colonization was just incredibly slow. I mean, in 1539, the Spanish send an expedition up north, find zero gold, and essentially write off the entire continent as useless. The English sent an explorer around the same time, but waited almost a full century before even trying to start a colony. And that first attempt, Roanoke in 1555, completely and mysteriously disappeared. It honestly wasn't until the 1600s, with Jamestown and the strict Christian pilgrims in Plymouth, that the East Coast even began to slowly populate. Section 2. Forging a new nation. Fast forward to 1754. The British colonies have grown to over 1 million people. Meanwhile, the neighboring French territory, right in the middle of the continent, only about 60,000. That huge population difference, plus all those competing land claims, sparks the French and Indian War. Britain and its colonists eventually win, grabbing massive new territories like Canada and half of Louisiana. But here's the catch. Britain is left with an absolutely massive war debt. So, to the British government, it made perfect, logical sense to start levying lots of new taxes on the colonists. To them, this was just paying the bill for the military help and protection they literally just provided. But, the colonists saw it completely differently. They felt like they were the ones always helping out Britain. And even more fundamentally, they totally rejected the idea of paying taxes to a parliament where they had zero voting representation. This fierce, totally intractable disagreement over taxes and representation is exactly what triggered the fight that quickly exploded into the 1776 revolution. Now, the messy reality of actually forging that new nation, it definitely wasn't an overnight success. Even after fighting and winning a brutal 5-year war of independence, their very first attempt at a government was kind of a disaster. The 13 colonies were basically functioning as 13 completely independent countries, united in name only, and the whole thing was failing fast. So they had to totally scrap that initial system, sit down and write a brand new, functional constitution, and finally elect George Washington as their first president in 1789 just to get things somewhat on track. Section 3. The fast phase. Okay, now we are leaving that era of slow, stumbling starts entirely. The timeline is about to rapidly accelerate. To understand exactly why this fast phase happened, you just need to understand this single number, 7. That was the average number of children per American family at the time. 7. This meant the U.S. population was practically doubling every 20 years. All those kids needed places to live, places to farm, and that drove an incredibly intense, relentless push westward into unclaimed lands. Lands that, of course, were the traditional hunting grounds of native tribes who were swept aside in this massive demographic wave. So, in a span of roughly 50 years, fueled by incredible luck, aggressive negotiation, and outright war, America somehow stretches from sea to sea. It's a chaotic blur, really. They buy Florida from Spain and hammer out border lines. They annex Texas, which had broken off from Mexico, and that sparks a pretty ugly border war. That war, plus a follow-up purchase, secures the vast northern territories of Mexico, including California, for a total of $25 million. And while all that's happening, they literally just sit down and draw a line on a map with Britain to split the Oregon Territory. It's breathtakingly fast. But
The true catalyst that actually kicked off this entire fast phase was the ultimate geopolitical real estate deal, the Louisiana Purchase. Francis Napoleon had secretly gotten Louisiana back from Spain and was dreaming of a whole American empire. But then reality hits. He realizes he desperately needs cash to fund his impending invasion of Britain. Plus, he figures selling it might make the Americans a permanent rival to the British. So Napoleon abruptly decides to just sell the entire massive territory. For a mere $15 million, America doubles its size quite literally overnight, securing the crucial Mississippi River and throwing the doors of Western expansion wide open. Section 4. War, Peace, and Purchases. By this point, with the continent seemingly conquered, the U.S. was expanding with so much confidence, they even passed the Guano Island Act. This literally allowed any citizen to claim random, uninhabited ocean islands just because they were covered in valuable bird droppings. I mean, talk about expansion. But right beneath this rapid exterior success, the newly expanded nation was completely, fundamentally fractured over the issue of slavery. In the northern states, slavery was illegal and increasingly viewed as a profound moral evil that had to be stopped. Meanwhile, in the southern states, the institution of slavery was deeply entrenched and seen as an absolutely essential part of their economy. After decades of bitter arguments, the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 really pushed things over the edge. Believing Lincoln was going to abolish slavery entirely, southern states seceded. This led to a devastating civil war. Ultimately, the North won, the enslaved people were freed, and the Union was violently held together. Remarkably, though, right after surviving this incredibly brutal internal war, that fast-paced momentum, it just immediately picked back up. Just hours after an assassination attempt on his own life, Secretary of State William Seward was already busy negotiating with Russian Ambassador Stockel. In this hasty, late-night deal, Seward secured the massive territory of Alaska for just $7 million. It was such an insane bargain that the Russian ambassador reportedly muttered to himself that he really should have asked for more money. Section 5. A New World Power. Having completely filled out the North American continent, America's rapid expansionist energy inevitably spilled out into the oceans. The fast phase was officially going global. American businessmen essentially orchestrated a takeover of Hawaii, and right at the same time, a major crisis was unfolding just off the coast. Cuba, which was one of Spain's very last colonies, was fighting a war for independence. American newspapers jumped on this, drumming up massive public sympathy for the Cuban revolutionaries. Then, in 1898, a U.S. warship mysteriously explodes and sinks in Havana Harbor. The U.S. demands Spain leave Cuba. Spain declares war. In just a rapid-fire sequence of events, the U.S. absolutely crushes the Spanish forces, capturing Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Oh, and during all that chaos, they officially annexed Hawaii to use as a strategic naval base. So in one incredibly swift stroke, the last remnants of Christopher Columbus's empire were wiped out, and the U.S. was officially an overseas empire. The next president, a young and very energetic Theodore Roosevelt, capitalized heavily on this massive new global footprint. He supported a newly independent Panama, specifically to secure the rights to build the Panama Canal, which was finished in 1914. This was an absolute engineering marvel, and it allowed his brand new world's second-largest navy to rapidly project power back and forth between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Right as World War I was beginning, the United States had undeniably arrived on the scene as a dominant world power. Now, a really deep tension emerged at the end of this fast phase of history. As leaders were debating whether to annex places like Hawaii or the Philippines, some strongly argued that America must remain a just nation that doesn't exploit the weak. But others feared that if America didn't secure these strategic global interests, rival powers like Germany or Japan absolutely would. So I'll leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder today. After completely transforming from an ignored landmass to a global superpower at breakneck speed, should America mind its own business or should it mind its own interests? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.